Welcome to We Chat Divorce, hosted by Karen Chellew, Legal Liaison, and Catherine Shanahan, CDFA. Each episode, we sit down with divorce professionals and industry experts to provide insights and frank discussions about real people, real situations, and real divorce to help you achieve your best life post-divorce. This episode of We Chat Divorce is brought to you by My Divorce Solution, offering divorce financial planning so clients can secure the divorce settlement they deserve. Visit mydivorcesolution.com to request access.
Most people walk into divorce believing one thing: whatever we have, we'll split down the middle. It sounds fair, sounds simple. We hear that so often. Pretty straightforward, we're simple. But in most of the country, that's not how the law actually works. And learning that mid-process and $50,000 later, while you're already emotionally stretched, can feel like the ground shifting underneath you. Welcome back to We Chat Divorce, brought to you by My Divorce Solution. I'm Karen Chellew, Legal Liaison, helping you navigate divorce with clarity, structure, and confidence.
And I'm Catherine Shanahan, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. And at MDS, we believe preparation isn't just about numbers, it's about understanding where you stand before you making decisions that impact your future. Sorry, I'm cutting you off, but I think one of the things, Karen, today was about talking about the zones, and it was interesting hearing the attorney talk about that, because that is our division scenarios, right? A, B, and C choices.
I love that, because so many people, Catherine, want divorce to be black and white, and it's almost like a security blanket for them, but divorce isn't black and white. And understanding the zones, and we call them ABC scenarios, is so important. So here we go. One of the most common misunderstandings we see, and what we're going to be talking about today, is the belief that divorce just automatically means a 50-50 split. In reality, only 9 states follow the strict community property rules, and in those 9 states, the trend is shifting to fair and just, which essentially means something similar to equitable distribution. We'll talk about that in another podcast. The other states use what's called equitable distribution, which is very different, and one that leaves a lot more room for nuance, negotiation, and sometimes surprise.
Yeah, I mean, Jessica is from equitable distribution state, Georgia, and she is bringing in the justice piece a little bit in her conversation, which was interesting because, we don't really have that from a lot of attorneys. Difference of everything matters. Your assumptions that everything gets divided equally or evenly, I should say, is not really a strategy. As we always talk about, there are things that you have to consider with every asset and every debt, and how is this going to look in your future? So this conversation might help you take pause a little bit and make sure that you get financially clear.
So if you've ever asked yourself, how's this actually going to get divided? Stay with us. Today's conversation brings clarity to one of the most misunderstood parts of divorce. Let's get to it. Jessica, welcome to We Chat Divorce. We are so glad to have you today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. For our listeners, Jessica Fagan is the founder of Fagan Law Group, an Atlanta-based family law firm focused on complex divorce, custody, and high-asset family matters. She represents professionals, executive entrepreneurs, and public figures through some of the most difficult transitions of their lives. And she's known for a strategic, pragmatic approach that helps clients move forward with clarity and dignity. Jessica's clients share a common mindset. They're thoughtful, goal-driven, and deeply committed to protecting their families while making informed decisions. And that's exactly the kind of perspective we want our listeners to have as they think about what divorce actually looks like, not in theory, but in practice. So Jessica, we'd like to hear, let's just start out with the story behind your work, and what's the path that brought you here, maybe a moment or turning point that really shaped it, to share with our listeners today.
I've been thinking a lot about this questions because I've been listening to past episodes that you two have hosted, and it's really ironic to me, or coincidental, how many of your guests, none of us thought we would do divorce matrimonial work. So many of us, you graduate at the top of your class or near the top or in the top, 50% even. And you go to a big law firm and you think you're going to do one thing. And the thing I wanted to do was be an environmental attorney. I wanted to do sustainability because that was a big buzzword in, the early 2000s. I wanted to solve the world's problems and help Mother Earth and be a good steward of God's earth. And unfortunately, that's not always the way that pays the best. And as a single woman, I started thinking, well, this is interesting. And my boyfriend at the time actually said to me, you'd be a really great divorce attorney. And I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but I started thinking about it and I started volunteering with the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation, which has this amazing opportunity for especially new lawyers to come out and stand with survivors of domestic violence and help them through the process. And I started realizing I liked that. And then at my former law firm, when somebody's child was getting married and they wanted a prenuptial agreement, it's a contract. So I draft the contract. And so that's kind of how I fell into it as I started realizing that I really did have an interest in domestic law. And then I started noticing, when those emails go out, does anybody have a referral for X? Nobody was asking, does anybody have a referral for an environmental attorney? But so many people were asking about divorce lawyers. And I said, wait, there's a business here. There's a business here. And so I actually called my 7th grade literature teacher who was practicing divorce law and said to her, hey, can I come work with you? And she said, yeah, come to my office right now. We'll talk about it. And I got there and she goes, where's your notebook? I said, what do you mean, where's my notebook? She said, do you want a job or were you just coming to hang out? And I said, oh, God. Okay. And so I started working, proving that, once a brown noser, always a brown noser. And it's always good to be the teacher's pet.
I love that.
Tell my 2 younger girls all the time, teachers do this because they love you and never know.
Mm-hmm. I used to be nice to the teachers so they were nice to my kids.
Exactly. You make sure you give a decent end of the year present,
Exactly.
Beginning of the year present.
Yeah. Even the bus driver, just to make sure that they actually drop my children off.
Especially the bus driver.
Yes.
The village is very important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So today we're going to get into the topic of 50-50. When people think divorce or they're approaching divorce, a 50-50 is always front and center, whether you're in a community property state or equitable division state. Jessica practices in an equitable distribution state in Georgia, so we'll primarily focus there. But let's kind of unpack 50-50. I think the visual that so many people have is you just lay everything out and literally chop it into 50-50. And some people experience that, which is not a good thing.
Right.
But let's unpack that a little bit and start talking about what is equitable distribution and what's the best approach and what are the different dynamics and factors to that.
So by and large, I'm only licensed in the state of Georgia, but most states in our lovely country are equitable distribution, equitable division states. And the word equitable means fair, right? And I submit to you that most people going through a divorce do not agree on the word fair, which is why having very intelligent financial analysts and advisors on the hand is a good idea. And so I was listening to a past episode, and someone shared about, one of you shared about how knowledge is power. And I say that so often, that knowledge is power, because you may think 50-50 is fair, but if you do not have the right advice, it might not be fair for a number of reasons, and it might not even be what you want, right? Like if you're looking at, I love being around smart people. So I always have smart accountants around me. And I'm very quick to say I love numbers, but I'm not a numbers person. You look at an account and you might say, okay, divide it in half, 50-50. But is that really fair? Because what's the tax basis on that? What am I going to, does your client know that they're going to be paying taxes at their current, is there a difference between a Roth IRA and a regular IRA? And so somebody may think, oh, well, I got this account and they got that account. But is it fair that they got the account that the taxes have already been paid, whereas you might have to pull it out and pay taxes on it? Is that what's fair? And one thing that is actually coming up more and more as women get more involved and own the businesses, are in the C-suite, is, well, we started with this idea that equitable division, we start at 50-50 and we move the needle either way. But why did we start at 50-50? And historically, that might have been because one party was at home, keeping the home fire going, and the other party was bringing home the bacon. But what's happening if that's not actually the history of that marriage? And I think that's really an interesting thing to look into, and how a business was built and how the household and the business was built over the term of a marriage, because it might not actually have been shared 50-50. So maybe.
Yeah. Well, it's great that you're a lawyer because I am not, and to have this conversation when I give pushback, you'll be great to give a legal perspective, because that is such a common feeling, especially when the woman is the wage earner, right? They are angrier that they have to pay support or they have to give up more than 50% of the assets than our men are that have to do it. And that's an interesting concept, right? Because a lot of times we have seen a lot of men who aren't working, the women are supporting them. They used to work, but then when the woman's income increased, they felt like they wanted to start a business or do something as a hobby. And, we see that. And then the attorneys always say to the females, well, you let that happen, which, what do you mean I let that happen? I didn't let it happen. I couldn't force them to do that. And so there's a lot of, this is where people want justice.
Correct. It's interesting because I think men kind of come into a marriage with the idea that if we get divorced, I'll probably have to pay alimony, or I'll probably have to give her half of my brokerage account. Women, we're not being raised that way. We don't go into it thinking it's going to fail necessarily the same, or most of us don't, right? And so as the family dynamics evolve, I think so are these ideas of what is equitable and what is fair. Because historically, when we looked at child custody, we look at who's the primary parent and who is the secondary parent. Both equally important, both very involvement, immensely important to that child. But one person typically carried the lift more. And historically, it was the woman, it was the mom. She was the one who scheduled all the activities. She was the one that scheduled the parent-teacher conferences, went to the parent-teacher conferences, bought the gifts for the bus driver, bought the gifts for the teachers. So what happens when the mom is still doing that and is creating a business worth a lot of money? Like, what if mom is wearing both hats? Is it still fair? What if the dad can't name the pediatrician? I am very lucky, and that I am happily married to a man who realized that he burned all the boats when he married a divorce lawyer. Like he accepted his fate, but he is also a high-powered, attorney, and he works for a big firm, and he has a very demanding job. But he also appreciates someone has to take the child to the pediatrician, and it can't always be mom. And so he is very involved. He's also heard a lot of podcasts I've done and a lot of presentations I've done, and he knows that, keep his foot in it. But not all men do it. They are more than happy letting the wife handle the laundry, handle the meal prep, handle the activities, sign them up for the activities, respond to the teacher, right? So many people. And so I am seeing women, when they are valuing their business and looking at the balance sheet, a lot of the conversations we used to have around primary parent are happening with equitable division as well. Now, has the needle moved as much as some of my female clients want? No. But I definitely think it's a conversation to have. And I think for accountants, look at where the money's being spent for the children too, right? Because if mom's credit card is the one buying the teacher presents, if mom's credit card is the one buying the uniforms, if mom's credit card is the one always being used at the grocery store, well, then let's do a little digging and look at the husband's spending. How much of husband's budget went to the family? Or was husband spending it on himself? And was wife's bucket always going to the family? And that's also a thing when I have the husband who isn't the breadwinner. I tell them, you better start leaning in, bro. lean in because
So are you suggesting or hoping that there is a value to how the structure of your family has been, like being the CEO to your family is awarded extra monies in equitable distribution? Because it could flip the other way too, because
it
the
could.
stay-at-home mom and the dad's working all the time. Now, because we hear that a lot too. Oh my gosh, I
Correct.
built the estate. She was a stay-at-home mom, and now I have to give it to her. I'm the one that works 60 hours a week,
Mhm.
70 hours a week. Where would be the line of marital and non-marital be?
I think it's really interesting because I am, despite my job, I'm a big proponent of marriage. And I think if we started looking at it more in a totality perspective, like what all is the lift? Because we have had breadwinners that are like, it's not fair. I built this business. How much does that person need? Is it really fair that I'm having to pay this much? Do kids really cost that much?
Mhm.
And then let's look at it. Like how much, like I think having accountants and, certified financial advisors get in there and really look at, okay, and yes, it's expensive to
Yeah.
do this, right? If the legal fees, the accounting fees are going to be high, but okay, let's look at a year. Let's look at a snapshot. How much was the other person traveling? And then what were you doing while they were traveling to keep it going? So while they're building the business, what's happening on the back end? And I think it is a really good awareness. And I think with a lot of couples, if they start having that awareness early, we may start saving some more marriages here, right?
If
So
they come
many,
through our process, we'll see what we do so much post-nut work because they come
right?
through our process.
Exactly. We do a ton of postnuptial agreements
Mhm.
because once they start realizing, A, when they realize the value of compound interest, right? Everybody's in these financial meetings, but nobody's really understanding the terms and everybody's too embarrassed to ask the terms. And so I think that's one thing it's lovely that you guys offer is to actually explain what the words mean, right? And
Absolutely.
how the account works.
And Jessica, I think to your point, it can play through the division of assets, but it really starts with the lifestyle analyses.
Exactly.
That's
Getting
all of our
people
clients
in,
start right there. Like,
I
what
love
is
it.
someone's ability to pay and what is someone's need? And creating that historical context and verification and accounting for that, that is so, so important. And that
So
makes the
important.
picture clear as to what I just said, someone's ability to pay based on their lifestyle. And historically,
Right.
the tables were turned there.
Correct. And so often people just don't know their budget.
So
You ask
often,
them
Most
every
often.
almost every
single
time,
day.
right? You say, "Well, how much is your cell phone bill?" I don't know. Well, how much are you paying on streaming services? Do you still have cable? I don't know. And you're like, okay, let's sit down. And I love that you guys, one of the very first documents we send new clients is the domestic relations financial affidavit.
Mm-hmm.
It seems very similar to the high end for y'all putting together your picture of their financial history is I need to know what your assets are. I need to know what your debts are. If you don't know what they are, that's fine. Can you tell me where they are? Which bank holds this? Oh, you still don't know that. Okay, great. Do you have any idea where your spouse has a debit card? Start looking at the mail coming in and writing down or, ask, hey, at dinner, can I see that credit card? And you look and you're like, okay, that's a Delta Reserve, American Express. So we know where to start. But then also just go through the budget. Because one thing I love that you guys are doing and that you're talking about is you're not starting at what do you want? You're starting, well, what's realistic? Because I might want a pony. Doesn't mean we can get a pony, right? And so you have to have that realistic conversation with your clients about everything. You
and
might
and
want sole custody, but do you really never want a break from your child? And all you do is see the Instagram post of your ex-husband out, at the
yeah.
beach?
And with all due respect, and I like everything you're saying, but we don't need your attorney asking you about your budget. We need to
Right.
do your lifestyle analysis. We need to gather your assets and debts, and then we need to hand it to you because that's where you thrive. When you have a
Correct.
prepared client, Then coming through our process, we hand it to you. Then you get to be the lawyer. Now we need to know
Correct.
what's your strategy with this information, and let's talk about how we built the family and where these numbers came from, and all
Mhm.
of that. And I think that is the great CPAs. Great, I love them, but we don't need a CPA to give an opinion yet about who's keeping what asset. We need to gather all that, see what we're missing, see if discovery is needed, see if the other side
See
will
if it
hand it up.
makes sense, right?
Mhm.
Let's say someone's living in a $4 million house, but okay, like Jeff Bezos only has an $82,000 a year salary, right? So let's say that, people who haven't looked at their finances in 24, 26 years, they don't know, right? They're just
No.
not paying attention to it. And so they think, oh, this will be fine. I can live on that. And they don't realize, no, you can't. Like, here's what over the past 12 months, you spend this much a month at a grocery store. Oh, you spend this much a month dining out. Oh, you know. But I do think for your people and your teams to also support us, ask who pays for it. Ask if it's a joint account. And if it's not a joint account, ask who pays for it. Or if your client strategically wants to be the one to pay for it, make sure they're paying for it.
Yeah. So my question here is, when a lot of people are approaching the divorce process or separation process with a lot of emotion, to your
Mhm.
point, Jessica, I've worked all this time, so I deserve, or I spent most of the time with the kids, so I deserve. And I think helping people understand that that is the emotion that you're bringing to the table financially and legally, those numbers have to be supported
Correct.
all the way down the line. And so let's just say someone comes in and we've done the work. We've got them prepared. We have all their assets and debts verified with supporting documentation, their lifestyle analysis completed. It goes over to you, and you have this scenario where, let's just say, um, the wife, your
Mhm.
client, is the wage earner, and it's a multi-million-dollar estate. How do the courts position themselves around that where you are? Do those, because we see it often on our end, that sometimes our clients are dismissed because the courts see them as, you're going to be fine. So there's no
Mhm.
need to dig into the details. This seems fair enough, and I'm not going any deeper. This is what I decide. Everybody needs to go home and be okay. Do you experience that as well in your courts that you litigate in?
So I always tell people, the judges are a wild card. We don't know what the judge is going to do necessarily. We have our experience, we've been in front of them for a very long time, but judges, they might be coming from, I don't know, a workers' compensation practice. So
Mhm.
they don't know anything about divorce law until they start sitting down at the bench and going to the seminars and trying to learn. Or they come from a criminal background, and so things might be viewed through that lens.
Mhm.
So what we have to do, a lot what we have to do is explain to both our client and to the judge. But I do tell people a lot, and this is quoting Judge Christopher Brasher in Fulton County, Atlanta, Georgia. He's a former judge, and he always says, I have a sledgehammer. I do not have a scalpel. If your life mandates a scalpel, you need to go. I don't care how many times you're going to mediation, but you need to work it out for your family, not in court. Because once you come to court, the judge really is going to assume you two obviously do not get along on anything.
Mhm.
Nobody here is really going to make, I mean, yes, there are reasons not to, right? There's plenty of reasons one person's completely unreasonable. But for the most part, when you get in front of a judge, they know there's a level of emotionality and unreasonableness. And so in some cases, it's just divided by two because there's too much yin yang, he said, she said. So when you face going to court, it is so important that you make sure that that story makes sense and that the numbers support it. Because judges ultimately they want to do the right thing, truth, justice, the American way, that they want to do something for justice. They believe in that white hat. And so if you can give them the power to do something and show why it makes sense and why it doesn't make sense, that can really be helpful, because otherwise, in most marriages, why wouldn't dividing the house in half make sense? But if you can come in and say, Judge, here's why dividing this account 50-50 actually doesn't make sense, because this is the riskier investment. Yes, that number's up today, but who knows what the political climate's going to be in 3 weeks, and that could easily go down. These are all emerging markets. And you might have to nicely educate the judge, because so many times, you just have to keep it simple and educate. And so, yeah, with the judges I'm seeing in Georgia, historically 50-50 was the way to go. But a lot of judges are wanting to keep people separate. So alimony, y'all mentioned this in a previous podcast that you had, that alimony is on the decline. People aren't getting the big alimony awards anymore, because really, people should go back to work for the most part, unless they're older or they're incapacitated in some way. And so what we're doing a lot is trying to get more than 50% in lieu of an alimony award, because then wisely invested, that can even be better for our client, and the parties are separated, right?
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to the concept that you brought up in the beginning and kind of elaborate on that, because I find it to be interesting. You brought up the thought of, we have two parties who are working, maybe earning the same. Wife may be building up a little bit higher, but she's also wearing the second half. Her second job, which could be her first job, is also running the household.
Right.
And by her credit card statements and everything, you see that she's always the one attending everything. His is more on personal things. And now we're coming to divorce, and it's almost like we're asking for an unequal distribution because this person put in double duty basically on everything.
Or we know this person is going to use their assets for the family.
Oh, okay. That's
why. We know their spending trend is family focused.
But what would you say to the other side if I'm the husband and I say, okay, yeah, that is how we did that, but now we're getting divorced. I'm going to change. I'm going to change.
That's exactly what the other side argument is, right? Is, well, I know that you paid it, but that was just how we did it. That was just what was easier. We put one credit card on file at the gymnastics studio, and so it was never a intentional decision. It's just whoever went to the first one put their credit card on file. Mm-hmm. And so that's where, devil's in the details. That's where the negotiation and the nuance come in. Mm-hmm. Everybody's worried about AI, but when it comes to human relationships, the nuance is not something that AI can always pick up on.
Oh,
right. And
or
yes, sure, we could throw it into AI and ask for AI to analyze bank account statements, but A, it gets it wrong. And B, but dive deeper. What's behind that, right? Yeah. Okay, you see that they pulled money out of this many ATMs, but then you want to look at, well, it's always the same ATM. Well, that's interesting. Can we cross-reference that with a map? What is that ATM near? Oh, that ATM is near, I don't know, a strip club. Isn't that interesting? Should we go put a PI at that strip club? We know, or that ATM is right by, or is in a part of town that they never go to. Why do they go to that part of town? Is there a substance abuse issue? What's going on? Or you looking at you summarize the spending at the grocery store, but then you want to really have somebody smart looking at it, saying, "Hey, the spending at the grocery store just went up $200 a week on average. Is somebody getting cash back? What's going on here?" And that's the nuance that AI is not going to necessarily replace.
But even if they're getting cash back, where do you find that? Cash is really hard to find.
It is hard to find.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just going to comment on AI because so many people are trying to solve all of their issues or questions with AI, and divorce is where they get the most information from my perspective, because what people don't understand is AI is mostly responsive to what you want to hear. Mm-hmm. So you're giving it a question with almost rhetorical. It can tell what you want to hear.
Right.
And that's what you're going to get back. But I also have a question. Let's just say that you have a pattern of MAC withdrawals at a strip club or cashback, mm-hmm. or all these various things. So, and we also know that the courts have very small bandwidth to listen to such data, right?
Yeah.
So when people are putting that data together, clearly, I think we all agree here today that to extract the emotion out of it as much as possible to get to the data that someone can hear and process, how does that convert then to advocacy in the courtroom so that or even mediation so that it can be heard and can be quantified into settlement negotiations?
Well, you're definitely going to be heard more at mediation because there's the time to do it, right? So if your client needs to emote, and I want to validate emotions, a big part of this is the emotionality of it. And so if your client needs to emote, it's a really good idea to go to mediation because then they can emote and they got their story out there and they're testing it. You're also getting to test them. It's a little bit like a deposition. You get to see how they react, what they do. What is the mediator responding to? What's the other side responding to? What's making them rethink their position? Where's your position strong? Where's it weak? So when you get in front of a judge, you know, this really landed. You know, the client that thought the $500 at the strip club over 2 years was awful realized that that didn't land. Like $500 over 2 years, you know, people might have bought clothes at TJ Maxx that didn't work for $500. You know what I mean? It's not as sassy as you think it is. It's not as sexy as you think. But when somebody comes out and they say, "Oh, you know that, you noticed that," or you're seeing them, I mean, it's just interesting. Like judges see the same thing over and over and over. So if you can give them something a little new to pique their interest, it is interesting. So, you know, let's say that very wise financial analyst looked at an account and said, you know, they're going to eat every day. They're charging this around like 445. It looks like one drink. That seems odd. Why would they just go on a marketing thing and never buy the other person's drink? And then you go and you put a PI there, or you go interview the bartender and you find out, oh, yeah, no, he's dating this woman who works in the building and she comes down every day at 4 o'clock. They have a business meeting and off they go. You know,
So, I just want to pick up from where I like the setup of mediation, so you can be heard, and you don't have your attorneys talking for you. You get to talk your own story, and they get to hear it. They don't really get to hear it because then the mediator generally goes and
translates
tells
what they want to, right?
right, which I always hate. I wish everybody was in the same room. But the problem with that is I wish that everyone knew that they don't have to agree in mediation. If you're going there just to be heard, so you get the justice piece out,
Right.
so you are heard, great. But you will be, I have been in so many mediations hired as an expert to go, that at the last 30 minutes, the last hour, they're coming in hot on you. Your own attorney is saying, listen, you heard what the mediator said. The judge said they might not even entertain this. And you're going to have to pay me another $50,000 to retain me to go to trial. Is that what you want to do? Like, how do we get away from that piece of it?
You mean forcing people to settle? Oh, well, I mean, so there's always a zone of settlement. When I'm meeting with clients, I always tell them there's a zone. Like, here's your best day in court, here's your worst day in court, and let's get in the zone. And then I need to know what's your risk, like, what's your risk capacity for that. Some people want to go fight in court because it's the principle of the matter. Even if it is going to be the same thing, it's just the principle of the matter. And they want to put it on the public record, and they're not going to settle something in mediation that doesn't go on the public record. You know, and it is hard when the mediator really wants to get the deal done. And yes, when you're within $50,000, you should get the deal done because
I
it doesn't
agree.
make sense to spend 50, 75, $100,000 on a multi-day trial
Totally agree.
when you're within the zone. But when you're not within the zone, I'm actually really glad you brought that up. I push back and I say, if you are not comfortable with this, I don't want to do it. I do not want you coming back because who's going to get the blowback? The attorney, the accountant? It's not going to be the mediator that was pushing it. It's going to be the attorney. Like, you forced me. You knew I wasn't comfortable with this. And I am a big old fan of CYA letters. I send them a letter afterwards and I say, here's what our last offer was. Here's why I think this was a good offer. Here's why I think this is something you should sleep on. please, dear God, don't talk to your hairdresser about it because they don't know everything. But like, like
I love that.
please, but like think on it. And here is my honest feedback on it is I do think this was in the zone of settlement, and I think you were unwise not to accept it. I think what we learned some weaknesses, or I might say, look, this is a very realistic offer we put out there. Let's go offer it to the other side. I know they rejected it. I know they said it was BS and they're never going to accept it. But you know what? They're going to go sit at home and they're going to realize, nope, that was in the zone. And am I willing to risk X because of my ego? But I will absolutely, Catherine, I will cut a mediation off because the last thing I want is a bad Yelp review, right? Like, I don't want somebody coming back and saying, well, Jessica is a really good advocate and she bullied me into taking this deal because I am a good advocate. I mean, I can convince you of a lot of things. You might not want to buy, ocean property in Oklahoma, but, I could probably convince you to think about it or go Google. I thought it was landlocked, right? Like a good lawyer might make you Google, isn't that a landlocked state? But no, my job is not necessarily, my job is to make sure that when you walk out of here, your head is held high and that you have a good relationship with your children. You have a good relationship, hopefully with your ex-spouse, and we haven't burned it all to the ground. Yeah. Sometimes it's merited to burn it all to the ground, but the best deal is everybody leaves a little uncomfortable, but also everybody got within their zone.
Well, I really do like the zone approach. And I think that, we talk about it a little differently. We go through 1, 2, or 3 scenarios with our clients. So they, along with our joint client, what's your strategy? Mm-hmm. What's this? Here's our scenarios. And those scenarios would be in that zone, right?
Right.
I'm really comfortable with that because I totally agree. If you're within $100,000, think of where you're settling here. And it is in that zone. And it is smart. Nobody wants to go to trial. It's a terrible process, right?
Well, you destroy your relationship with the other person when you go to trial because you've got to pull it all out.
Even if it's not that, I mean, a client needs to be able to talk to you with what they want. They work for you. You are the smart one. You know the legal strategy. You know the law, right?
Right.
But the client has to take ownership too.
Absolutely.
Right? You have to know where you don't have enough financial clarity, where you do have financial clarity, and then you have to advocate for yourself, even with your own attorney. Mm-hmm. So I like that you give that zone approach to them, because then if they're sitting in mediation, they can turn to you and say, is this in my zone? And then you legally could say, no, or yeah, I think it is, or whatever it is. But if you don't have an informed client, it's hard for you to do that, which is why you get the bad rap. Right. Because they're so unclear and they think you're telling them something that they're not hearing right, or they just don't have the financial
for
clarity.
Mediation as if it's trial. I do not like what some attorneys like just walk into mediation. Who are these people? What am I doing? No, absolutely not. My client needs to know. I want to have documents drafted so the first time they're seeing the legalese isn't at mediation when they're already stressed after 6 hours. We need to know where we're going with this and where can we move. Let's ask for this. But if they don't go for that, what's our plan B? And so as long as we're in the zone, we're going to have a plan A, B, C, D, whatever, however many it takes. But we know where we're going so that we're not casting blindly, hoping that we get a deal that's okay. I also want my client to have talked to somebody. If we settle in this zone, what does my future look like? If we settle in that zone, what does my future look like? Can I accept less in alimony if I get more in child support? Can I accept less in child support if they're paying more over here? Right. Maybe they will. Can I accept 48% instead of 50 if I get them to agree to pay this, this, this? Mm-hmm. Can I take the house and accept less than 50, knowing that I can immediately run out and leverage against that house, put that money into a good brokerage account and earn that back in 2 years? So you may look like the victim who didn't win, but very rarely are the good attorneys making decisions that aren't actually, I play chess, not checkers.
Yeah, that's so great. And let's not go to any mediation without feeling confident enough that you have enough documentation to verify those assets and debts. It's so often that one spouse hasn't even answered discovery. They're going to mediation and trying to settle on what are purported values. And, that's not a good situation.
If you don't feel comfortable with 50-50 and just say whatever's there, divide it in half, you are doing such a disservice to not even pay for a consultation with an accountant or financial advisor, to just say, tell me what I know, because there's the known unknowns and there's the unknown unknowns. And not everybody's hiding millions of dollars on an offshore bank account, but to just not even know what your own need is. How many people haven't even gone on the marketplace to see what their health insurance premium might be? You know, how many people haven't looked at Zillow to see what houses cost in their market and what the down payment would need to be?
Only people
know?
that haven't gone through our process
Exactly,
do all
exactly.
that.
People that just was like, let me just Google who I should hire, or
Yeah.
oh, look at this person, and also I tell people this: interview attorneys. Don't just go to the first person and hire the first person because you're scared. Don't make decisions because of fear. Like, make decisions because of knowledge. And if it takes a minute to get that knowledge, go talk to multiple people. And don't just go to yes, sometimes we have to tell them, you're going to be fine. Like, yes, that's a lot of money. Yeah, I know you don't know, but it's actually a lot of money. As long as we're on this budget, this $500,000 a year, $1 million a year budget, you're going to be fine. But, people need to have that comfort, because their life just took a major detour. But just because it takes a detour doesn't mean it's not going to be a beautiful scenic detour. Like, some of the best adventures I've had on a road trip have resulted from the wrong turn.
Yeah,
But
true.
that doesn't mean it's not a dead end sign, it's a detour sign.
Well,
But you just need to know it's a
my
good one.
life. My life is very scenic. I had 2 divorces, and it's
There you
been a
go.
journey.
But now you have the benefit of that knowledge to tell people, like,
Yes.
hey, you're going to be fine to start with.
So fine is a definition that only you could do for yourself. It's a word I don't really love, but I agree with that. And Jessica, I love these clarifying conversations for our listeners. I just want to pull together a few of these thoughts today. Jessica brings up a really great point of knowing what your zone is. We call it division scenarios. It's the same thing. But knowing this information and then going to your attorney, you see how she would advocate for you, right? Knowing your good, bad, or indifferent scenario really makes you informed to make really good decisions, no matter what pathway you have to take through the divorce process. So I really do love that you do that. And I think it's even good for when you're getting prepared for divorce. So thank you for sharing that with us today.
Absolutely.
Jessica, what you just walked us through connects directly to what we see every day at My Divorce Solution. Before anyone can have meaningful conversations about how assets should be divided, you actually need to know what they are clearly, accurately in one place, so you can have the best conversations with your attorney and make the best decisions for yourself. So Jessica, again, thank you so much for bringing so much clarity to a topic that trips up nearly everyone, as we all know at the beginning of the process. Where can our listeners learn more about you and your work and your law firm?
Sure. So if you go online on the World Wide Web, as we used to call it, right?
Yes.
FaganLawGroup.com, Fagan lawgroup.com. That's our website. If you are on Instagram, we are at Fagan Law. And don't worry, I joke all the time that my views are so much higher than the number of followers we have, because it does take a certain interesting person to be comfortable enough to follow a divorce lawyer, right?
Agreed.
But I always joke, because some of my friends, when they repost my stuff, their husbands or their wives are like, why are you posting Jessica stuff?
Yeah.
So, but at Fagan Law on Instagram. Then, of course, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm searchable. So feel free to reach out. I'm always happy. I have an amazing team of attorneys, paralegals, and support staff. So always happy to help people if we can.
And to you listening to us right now, if you're somewhere in this process or even just starting to think about it, the MDS community is free. It's a supportive place to learn, ask questions, and hear from others who are navigating similar challenges. We will include that link in the show notes. But before we go, just a gentle reminder, take pause wherever you are in this process. It's a lot to unravel, and the 3 of us totally get that. You don't need to have the answers today. You're allowed to gather information before you really make any decisions, and learning how the process actually works is not the same as acting on it.
Because clarity changes everything. So until next time, protect your peace and let knowledge be your power. And Jessica, thank you again for a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of We Chat Divorce. We hope this episode was informative and supportive on your divorce journey. If you're looking for more support for navigating divorce with confidence and clarity, head over to mydivorcesolution.com for more podcast episodes, divorce events, and resources for your divorce. We'll see you back here for our next episode.